So how do you get a real Broadway show gig anyway? What are the special skills that are required? How long does the gig last? What does it pay? We're going to get answers to those and a lot of other questions from my special guest, Warren Odze, a veteran New York consummate musician with tons of Broadway shows under his belt.
I think what our symbols brought to the Sabian family is that there is lots more hand hammering. They were willing to try it, and I think we came out with a great product that is a great musical instrument.
Memphis Drum Shop is the world's premier provider of percussion instruments. With 6 showrooms of gear, mycymbal.com, the Memphis Gong Chamber, and a first-rate repair department, turn to Memphis Drum Shop for all your percussion needs.
Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Bobby A, and today I wanted to tell you about how much I really love the Hudson Music digital app. Okay, now, check it out. It's an app that you can get for your device, and you can purchase books from the Hudson Music digital store and have them stored right on your device. The great thing about it is you always have it with you, and any content that might be video related or music related is right there at your fingertips. It's a wonderful resource.
Welcome to another edition of Drummer Nation Live, the show where we talk about all things drum and drum related with some of the best in the world. And I have as my pleasure and honor a wonderful guest, Warren Odze, who is known a lot for his Broadway work, but he's done so many things. And I've gotten to know him recently in the last couple of years. Great cat. Welcome, Warren.
Hey, Michael.
Thanks for doing the show.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to turn this into a couple of drummers hanging out pretty soon, but let's go over some basic early stuff. You were born and raised, New York, New Jersey, up around there, right?
Yeah, I was born in Brooklyn, and we moved to Long Island when I was 3. So I'm first generation spoiled Long Island brat. You know, the pot. We didn't have a pot to pee in generation, and then they became successful, middle class people.
Yeah, well, good for you. Good for you. So at some point you started playing rock and roll drums to the stuff you heard on the radio?
No, it's weirder than that. My father loved music. He wasn't a musician, but he used to go see Joe Jones play all the time. And Joe was a family friend. So the first real music I heard in the house was Sinatra, Basie. My sister's 5 years older, so there was Little Anthony and the Imperials and Johnny Mathis and that thing. And so and then the guy across the street had a snare drum, and my father used to get together. They'd play brushes. I don't know what they did. I was attracted to it. But when I was 10, the Beatles, you know what happened, man. Everybody in my generation, everyone went crazy.
We're about the same age. We all have the same story. We saw Ringo, and that was that.
Everybody has the same story. It's unbelievable, man. I mean, everybody has the same story. So, that started that whole thing. And, I was in rock bands all through teenage land in Long Island, which was, Billy Joel country and Vanilla Fudge and that whole thing in 60s,
Sure. But at some point you got hip to the jazz thing too, right? Well, you lived with Joe Jones. I mean, he was not lived with, but
he used to come to, believe it. I know this is crazy, but he used to come out to the house and visit. And his daughter used to stay with us for a couple of weeks. And this is like a fun story. I don't know if you've heard this before, but
please go ahead.
Well, Joe played at my bar mitzvah. Yes, Michael, you can't make that up. My father passed away when I was 10. He was in a car accident, and Joe was a family friend. My mother invited him to the bar mitzvah, okay? He said, great, thanks, but you know what? Let me bring my trio, and we'll play. So he brought the Bryant brothers. So there's Joe Jones with Tommy and Ray, and they played a concert in the middle of the bar mitzvah.
Wow.
I mean, it's totally crazy.
That's magical stuff.
that's magical stuff. So the other thing that's magical, and I know I said it to Harold Jones, maybe in your room, was the night of the bar mitzvah. I went to see. They took me to see Count Basie's band at the Rainbow Room, whatever they called the Rainbow Room in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that that was like his very first beginning with that band.
Harold was on the gig that night?
He was playing with Basie. So I had two Jones in one day. Yeah.
All you needed was Elvin to make it a trio, right?
Maybe Elvin was lurking around in the city somewhere.
His spirit was
there. Yeah, that's crazy, man. So,
that's
great.
I
got interested in playing jazz, and but then I kind of made the decision, well, okay, I'd really like to do this for a living, but I had no classical background. I had no any of that background. Mm-hmm. But I somehow crammed something into going to Manhattan School of Music. I got a little marimba. I don't know. I auditioned. I got in on a trial basis. Because, like, it's a conservatory, man. You're in there with, people who are going to Juilliard prep and whatever.
Serious cats in there.
Yeah, serious guys, man. And I just killed myself for 4 years, and I was in. By then, I was a jazz drummer. I know this is really nuts, but I did this concert when I was in my second year. My friend was friends with Milt Hinton, and he introduced me to Milt. And Joe Jones bagged on this concert at Williams College, and they said, and Milt said, because he's always trying to help people, so he said, well, why don't we get your friend to play drums? So there I am in my second year of college in a room, tiny room in this woman's apartment that I rented, and Milt picked me up with his wife Mona, put the drums in the car. I went to do this concert with, it was amazing, man. Dill Jones. It was just amazing. And he got me this job with Bernie Layton. I don't know if you know who Bernie is, but
go ahead, tell people.
What's that?
Tell people.
Well, Bernie was not a household name, but one of the top studio guys of all time. And he took Jess Stacy's place in Benny Goodman's band. He was a fantastic piano player, and he had a steady gig at this club, Jimmy Weston's, on the East Side. And there I am. I'm with Milt and Bernie, and, it's like, and then the subs, when Bernie would take off, were like Hank Jones. Then there was a guitarist on the gig, and then you'd see Gene Bertoncini, Derek Smith. And I'm like in my, maybe by now third year of college playing with these guys.
But that's your real education way over my head, right?
Unbelievable.
That's the real education.
Way over my head.
Yeah, yeah.
And then in college I started playing with Jackie and Roy.
All right.
And then I got out of school and I was off to the races,
so
gig land.
You got your bona fides as a jazz player the real way, man.
I played with, I worked with Johnny Hartman. I worked with all the singers.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Hartman, Chris Connor, Susanna McCorkle, Astor Gilberto, that whole. So I know a lot of jazz musicians, but mostly from working with singers,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess I'm a jazzy, as Mike Renzi would say about people like me. Warren, you're a jazzy guy, which is kind of, that's kind of right, jazzy
Nothing wrong
guy.
with that. Nothing wrong with that.
No.
Yeah, that's good training, too. How about your reading? Did you learn all that stuff in school? I'm sure you did, right?
Yeah, sure. I was also in Rusty Dietrich's band. I don't know if you know Rusty, but Michael, this was the very beginning of that movement to where conservatories started letting people play jazz in the school.
Right.
In the old days, when Max Roach and those guys went to Juilliard, there was no jazz, man, Right. So we used to go and we used to win these competitions because it was New York City, man. We had these graduate students, and we had John Faddis was in the band for a minute. So we had these major killer New York guys who were getting degrees. It's New York City, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And David Friedman had a class, Valerie Capers. And, my class had some amazing musicians, man. Kenny Kirkland, Bob Mincer.
So great,
Mitch Foreman.
great environment, challenging
Incredible.
environment, but you had to step up and take care of business too. Did you learn
Abs-
mallets and all
absolutely.
that in college? You learned mallets too?
I used to be a percussionist,
Mm-hmm.
and I did. Part of my story is I was a percussionist and a drummer, and I played a lot of percussion gigs, record dates, live gigs. One of the highlights of my percussion life was playing with Peggy Lee as a percussionist, and the one and only Grady Tate was playing drums. And I got to meet Grady, and I sat behind him and just was in shock for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just love that guy so much. I love his playing. I always try to emulate him when playing with, accompanying people. He was just peerless when it came to accompanying people. I love that guy. And, yeah, it was amazing. But then I kind of made a decision to stop playing because I just never thought I could be good enough to do everything,
You say stop playing, you mean stop playing percussion and be a drummer?
Stop playing percussion. I mean, I did this record in college. Barbara Cook did this thing at Carnegie Hall. I played percussion and drums on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, to be really good at all of it, I didn't love it either, I just didn't love it, man.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, I mean, today I would love to be able to really play the marimba, and the timpani. But I just didn't have the ambition. I just didn't love it. That's it, man.
That's the best way to put it. I'm in that same boat. I went to college in North Texas, and I had never played a xylophone, and I had an audition on a marimba or xylophone, I don't remember which, and I could improvise. So I just played Take 5.
Wow.
I could just do that. So I got a little scholarship to go there, and I went there, and they realized that I didn't know shit about marimba.
Are you a piano player?
No, I could just kind of wing it. And I learned that thing, but I started studying marimba and timps and all that stuff you do, and I realized I don't dig this, man. I really just don't like being. It's not my instrument.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it.
I don't know, man. I wanted to be Tony Williams. It just, when you're young, you just can't see the big picture,
Right. I had a gig in a Dixieland band right out of high school, and I tried to be Tony Williams. And there was nobody
Yeah,
there. Hey, kids, don't do that.
I ruined a lot of gigs doing that, by the way.
It's being young.
Like playing night and day and trying to play like Tony Williams. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, bad idea. But when you're a kid, you don't know that.
Yeah, you don't know. So then I became a drummer. And, when I was in college, I subbed for my teacher, Al Pollack, who was a great teacher. And incidentally, he was one of Billy Gladstone's students. Not many people, I don't know anyone alive who can say they, I think they're all gone, right?
So, but you were there in like a golden age of being a musician, sideman in the New York scene, right?
The old cats were already whining about the scene that's falling apart. The guys who were 30, 40 years older than me, because they remember, like the Sonny Igo generation, they remember staff jobs, I mean, from what guys tell me about in those days, you could just work from morning till night. If you had enough talent, you could just go, go, go. I mean, when I was in my 20s, there was a caste system, okay? The very top level guys played the records. Those were the Grady Tate, Steve Gadd. Steve had just come on the scene in those days. Those were the top guys. Then the bottom below that were the jingle guys, And then below that, I think show guys, Broadway show guys, coupled with playing weddings.
That's interesting.
But there was a serious caste system. Those A-team guys would never take a gig where they would, they would never play at a wedding. Never. First of all, they didn't have to, and also, in those days on Broadway, you couldn't take off. They didn't have, you were at the mercy of the conductor and the contractor. Today, the contract is incredibly generous.
Mhm.
You can take off 50% of the time, plus you have 8 sick days and 3 weeks, 24 shows worth of vacation days. It's
Wow.
very generous, man.
That definitely doesn't suck.
No, so guys, even today, man, they're the top cats are playing whatever show they're playing, and they get a last minute call to do whatever, and they go do it, and they have 5 subs that are really good, and it's pretty great, man. It's very generous.
Well, I want to back up and talk about the whole Broadway scene because there's a lot I want to ask you about that. So I
Sure.
presume back then, like it might be today, a kid gets out of school, he's got his chops together, he gets a resume of some professional work, and in New York, you start to get in the Broadway thing. You start as subbing for people, I presume. Find somebody who digs you, and how does that work?
Okay, well, it's such a broad. How does it work? There's so many ways it can work.
Mhm.
So, like I said, when I was in college, I subbed for my teacher as a percussionist. The conductor said to me, "Hey, I have a show coming. Do you want to play it?" I said, "No. Who? I don't want to be with these old alcoholics in this pit." You know, it was like that. I'm a young guy. I want to go
You're
crazy.
young, you're hip, yeah.
Right. So, and then I really couldn't. I subbed over the years a little, but I didn't devote myself to that. I was always on the road doing something or doing this and that. And so the way I actually got into the real grown-up Broadway scene is so bizarre, but I think everyone's got a different story. I used to play with this guy, Kirk Nurok, who was, he's still around, a jazz composer and pianist. We had a free jazz group, okay? And it was a great group. Roger Rosenberg was in it. Sometimes it was Jerry Jamad or Harvey Swartz. And Kirk was still involved in commercial music. He got a show and recommended me. It was Three Musketeers. I played the show. It lasted 2 weeks, but I met the conductor who liked me. So basically, years later, he put a show together and he pulled me in, you know? But yeah, the typical thing is subbing.
Right.
Subbing around. And it's like anything, man. I mean, if you're good at something, people, music business is all word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could talk, and then you're Elvin Jones and we're done talking,
Yeah.
There's no more talking when you hear that guy play, right?
Mhm.
So that's, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of components to this.
Right. Well, let me ask
What kind of
you.
is,
Go ahead.
well, what kind of is a little bummer for me is these guys, they want to come right out of college and go right into a Broadway show, right?
Mhm.
I just can't, I guess I'm old or something, man, but don't you want to go out there and try to change the world with your drums or something? You know what I mean? It just seemed weird to want to do that. I understand the music business is a shell of its former self, but I know cats who can still play, and they're out there and they're going to Europe, and young guys that aren't household names, and somehow they're clawing their way through the system. And I think you have to learn how to play, man. I think it's really important, and I know there's less opportunities, but playing on Broadway is like playing on a film score, playing a jingle. You're not going to learn when you go on the jingle, and it's a 60-minute jingle with whatever or a film score. When the guy says, "Hey, man, I want one of those late-night Texas shuffles."
Right.
If you never played that somewhere, you're not going to learn it on this guy's film date,
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
When John Williams,
do your homework.
yeah, when John Williams turns to you and says, "Yeah, man, this is like one of those late-night smoky bar Texas blues bands,"
Sure.
Well, you're not going to say to him, "Well, what do I play, John? I don't know what that is."
No.
Or when they say, this is like, guys, here's the scene here. We're at a cocktail party and you're the band in the corner playing bossa novas, Or, there's some Bobby Darin guy up there and it's one of those swinging big band things, right? Or whatever. You should do the best you can to learn how to play. This is super important, okay? I hate to be so cynical, but a lot of times when these guys say, well, I want to go from my college thing to be the drummer at the Lion King, I call it starting at the end because
Good.
it's just one facet. You know, you can't depend on that one show you get called for to become the Lion King and you have a lifetime job. Because these shows close. You know, they close often, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. When I had my cymbal company, we sponsored the cymbals for this guy. Ron Krasinski was working with a show called Cash about Johnny Cash, and
Okay.
we got the we got to go to the opening and all that. Brought my wife up there. We had a great time, but the show closed in like 2 weeks. I mean, that was that. They don't get a long
Yeah.
run to figure out if it's going to work. And so sometimes a gig goes for 5 years, and sometimes it goes for 2 weeks, right?
Absolutely. And, I'm not the greatest by any means, but I feel like I've been able to make a living all these years just because I really did visit all these worlds,
Right.
I did play professional rock and roll. I played with Johnny Hartman. I know what that sounds like. Even if I'm not the best at it, I definitely know what it sounds like and how to get pretty close.
Absolutely. And there's so many
Um,
styles you have to cover. Let's talk about once you get the gig and you're in the
Okay.
pit. Now, we used to call it showtime or Broadway time. When you're in a big band and somebody kicks it off, you ain't moving it.
That's right.
You are not moving it. I remember Jeff Hamilton told me John Von Olin was working with Rosemary Clooney, and she said, "You can't move that son of a bitch," as a compliment. But in Broadway shows, the conductor's got a lot to answer for, right? I mean, if it's 10 clicks too fast, the singers are spitting out the lyrics, blah, 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 or the dancers are falling over each other, or there's a lot going on, and it could be his fault, her fault. Kicked it off a little fast, you got to move with them, right? I mean, the conductor is everything.
Michael, you hit upon the DNA of the whole situation there. That's it, man. That is totally it. And I say to people, first of all, I know a whole bunch of unbelievably famous studio guys that have struggled on Broadway because they are that guy where you count it off and they just nail it to the wall. If it's 5-minute tune, 2-minute tune, 30-minute tune, these guys are masters at nailing it to the wall, right?
Right.
And these people have a hard time, man, like with the Broadway thing. So I tell people this all the time. People have this fantasy in their mind that they're going to, I'm going to practice really hard and I'll be as good as Dave Weckl and I'll just go in there and kill it. That's not going to really help you that much there. The main thing is, can you follow a conductor and make it sound effortless? You dig?
Absolutely.
The little hills and valleys, when they want to go a little bit faster. And I have to admit, man, the gigs that I ruined, a lot of it was because I couldn't figure out what the conductor was doing.
That's a common thing. I remember once I was I don't have a career to compare to yours, but we can talk drum stories. I was asked to go play with the Birmingham Pops Orchestra. So I get down to Birmingham. It's 3 hours from Atlanta. And I set up my kit, and the guys say, "Hey, man, we need you to play crash cymbals on one tune. Can you do that?" I'm like, "Well, I haven't had crash cymbals in my hands in 20 years, but sure, I'll do it." All right, so, it's the first tune. I say, okay, well, it's the first beat. Okay, so I've never seen it. You know where this is going. I've never seen this conductor before in my life. And it's a rehearsal. And his first beat is one of these. Kind of. And he goes, "Late." And I'm like, "Oh, fuck, is this going to be this? How it's going to be? This guy's just set me up." So I got through it and talked to him afterwards, and we had a great gig. But I've never been more frightened in my life than trying to play.
I feel your pain, brother.
One cymbal crash on downbeat one with a conductor I've never seen before.
I feel your pain, and I tell people, man, I call it the family secrets. So, you gotta. Let's say you're going to go sub in a show, okay? Now they have a scene where you videotape and you can see what the guy's doing.
Right.
By the way, you're frozen. Am I frozen in your world?
No, we're working here, so let's just keep rolling through it. Could just be your monitor.
What? But I have FiOS. This can't happen. Anyhow, uh, you got to like watch the video and try to understand what this guy's doing, and then you have to get the relationship between what that band is doing and the conductor's doing. I subbed in this one show. I swear to you, man, I knew the show better than the regular guy, but I didn't understand the conductor. And what he did was he starts the tune, the tempo he wants, and then he's like looking at the stage, and his hand is going limp. The band is going into the future. His hand is going into the past. And I'm like, well, who do I go with? Mm-hmm. So that is the hardest part, man, is figuring out this conducting thing. And I've talked to like cats in the Philharmonic. They say the same thing, you know.
Yeah, the joke is the jazz musician, you know, is used to the kickoff, right? Boom, that's the downbeat on the stick, as they call it, right? And in the orchestra, they do this, and then the orchestra goes, da.
Yeah.
And the old joke is that, where is it? And the guy says to the other people in the orchestra, where is it? They say, well, we don't know either, just don't be first.
It's so true, man. And, you know, like you get the job, you know, the concert master actually commits to something, and then the rest of them just meekly fall in. But we play the drums. We can't do that.
You know, I asked Harvey Mason. He did the not to mention, I hate to drop names, but, you know, Obama.
Go ahead, man.
Obama told me yesterday. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I asked him about, he played the Academy Awards for like 25 years. And you get like little bits of 30 seconds of music for 5 different things.
Yeah.
Right? And then they announce the winner, and the conductor gives you a downbeat. And I said, okay, I got that. I can see the downbeat. Where's beat 2? And he says, beat 2 is on me. So,
Michael, I did the Tony Awards for 8 years.
Okay, so you know exactly what I'm saying.
Well, most of it is most of it is pre-record.
Okay.
But what Harvey's talking about, they give you a sheet of paper. I know exactly what he's talking about. And they have little snippets from each show's thing. Like if they say, The Godfather wins, right? Mm-hmm. And the conductor has no time because it's live TV. They throw their hand down, and like Harvey said, first of all, you have to find it on this piece of paper.
Right.
And then you have to commit to something, right? So now Harvey's a symphonic guy. So he's, right? I mean, wasn't he like Vic Firth's guy at New England?
I'm not sure.
I think he broke into the studio thing as a percussionist.
I think he did, yeah.
He's a formidable talent, that guy, man. But so, yeah, man, figuring out the conducting is everything. And, you know, you got to be, and like musicians, they get confused. They think they're going to a gig. You're not going to a gig. A Broadway show or a TV show or a symphonic gig, it has elements of a gig. But the conductor, he's dealing with the dancers, the actors, the stage manager. He's dealing with the sub-lead trumpet who plays a little behind the beat, you know. He's dealing with a first-time sub on drums, you know. He's got everything going on. He can't baby you and feed you every beat, right?
Right.
And you just have to go big picture on the whole thing. But I tell you, man, that's the deal breaker. People who don't play that great but can follow the conductor can actually make a living, as opposed to people who play great but can't follow. If you can't follow, it's over. It's over.
This was big band, which is not supposed to be this way. But when I was a kid, I auditioned for the Glenn Miller Band. And the guy had me as my audition, call up charts, and I had to read them. And he would say, watch me because I'm going to change. And he would change the time because he wanted to make sure before he hired me that I could follow him. So whenever something gets out of whack, he's going to be able to control the drummer. That's all he wanted to know. He knew I could cover the big band gig. But that was the key, what we're talking about. Can you follow the conductor?
It's a total deal breaker, man. I can't say it enough times to people who want to break into musical theater or TV work or whatever. You've got to be able to gently go from 3 miles an hour to 5 and make it sound seamless, you know, and interpret what this guy's doing. And like I said, sometimes what the band is doing is not what it looks like the guy's doing, because they have, again, what I call the family secrets. You know, if you say to the regular guy, you're going to watch them because you're going to sub. You go, hey man, measure 10. You guys speed up a little, and they'll say, no, we don't speed up a little there. Because they're so used to it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing that's hard for subbing is it's subconscious too on the conductor's part and the band's part. But after a couple of weeks of a show, the conductor kind of gives up the throne to the drummer. So the drummer starts controlling things, but now you get the poor guy coming into sub, and the conductor's like, oh my God, what's happening? Because they've kind of quietly given it up to the drummer, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like, almost like you make them feel like they're doing it, but you're doing it.
You're following and leading at the same time. Don't try to figure that out, man. You'll get a headache. But
Right,
my
so
friend...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
There's an older style of orchestral type shows, and then there became a lot of synth and tracks and clicks and more pop music oriented. I remember Steve Smith talking about when he actually got fired from Journey because it went to synthesizers and sequencers, and he didn't play that way. He played great, but he didn't play that way. And then he had to go back to the drawing board. He freely admits this. It's not a put down.
Yeah.
He had to go back to the drawing board and figure that shit out and then come back.
Wow.
And different career. But it's like the mid-'80s onward, all of a sudden there's sequencing. And the drums have to be beyond, it's like not natural time. It's like perfection.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? And then they go in and out, right? Then there's some orchestral stuff. Then it's conducted again.
I practice a ton to a metronome, and I've done a bunch of these kind of shows you're talking about. The last one that I did that was that fussy was this thing King Kong, which was a failure. But the guy who did the arranging, he had all these sequences in there, and the subdivisions were down to 30-second notes. So there was no like, guys, we're going to use a click, but everyone's kind of feeling things. There's that kind of session where the click is a tempo guide, but not really an exact thing.
Right.
But in this show, precision was everything. I call it inputting the data. If you weren't exactly pristinely in there with those 16ths, it sounded bad because we played to tracks, right? It wasn't just us playing to a click. You just have to. How do you do? You just practice a lot,
It's a different mindset, isn't it? We think of the click as something to make sure we're not getting faster or slower. But this is like microscopic analysis.
Microscopic.
30-second note, that's perfect. And
yeah, what works for me is, I know this is like a little too California hippie-ish, but if you let it happen as opposed to make it happen, if you just relax into the click, it's much better than thinking, wow, we're really burning, let's go for it. That usually gets you in front of the click, right?
Yeah. And
I've found from doing this a lot that when you just relax and breathe, and then you listen back to it, it sounds really good,
I like that. Relax and breathe.
If you just relax and breathe, and it might not feel like you're burning or something, but you are burning because it's really relaxed and in there,
Now, it's not cheap to live in New York, everybody knows.
No.
Broadway is a living, right? I mean, if I were to move to New York at 25, 40, whatever I am at the time, and I get a first gig on Broadway, and I'm the guy with the chair, and I'm not asking your personal information, but what kind of bread is that? I'm sure
it's a lot of money. It could be, if you have a lot of doubles.
It's New York,
The union thing is really strong. If there was no union on Broadway, I mean, a show would pay $20 and there'd be like 30 of them in a week. I mean, it can pay really well. I can't remember what the scale is. If you have no doubles, it's a lot of money. But if you have a bunch of doubles, it can be, and then premiums. Like if you're the in-house contractor, if you play an electronic instrument, you could be making between $3,000 and $4,000 a week.
Okay, that's what I was looking at.
With medical benefits.
There you go.
And
pension.
And pension. Uh, I mean, I did a lot of union work, so I have a pension, which is, just an unbelievable blessing. I didn't plan it that way, but it kind of worked out that way.
So cats can do a couple 100,000 a year on Broadway, but they're living in New York. You know, that's not a fortune.
Well, that's a sore point because it's getting, from when I was in my 20s to now, you used to be able to park on the streets easily, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and now there's metered parking everywhere. The parking lots, one of our last favorite parking lots that me and my friends use is it went up crazy. Now they're talking about this congestion parking thing, driving. I mean, if these guys, if you live in New Jersey, man, between the toll and the parking, you might as well just stay home.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad.
Now, generally,
Um,
in a theater gig, you're not schlepping, right? I mean, the stuff goes in and it comes out
no,
when the
you
show
don't
is
take
over.
any. Yeah, I mean, you don't take anything out of there.
Right.
You just walk out at night.
That's great.
Oh, it's
And it's
amazing.
10:30 or so. It's not late.
Yeah, but man, it's exacting work. It's not. It's like a concert every night, or a very intense recording session. If you do it right, and you kind of have to do it right because it's a big deal.
Sure.
It's heavy lifting every night.
Now,
You really have to pay attention. I think they call it when you start a show, it's terror, and then it turns into boredom. So it's terror followed by boredom.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Really have to pay attention, and you can't phone it in. You know,
Well, the great players never phone it in, right?
great players never phone it in. They never phone it in. I've done gigs like crappy gigs with these super amazing household name musicians. To them, it doesn't matter if like it's Carnegie Hall or we're down the block. They're just always amazing. They don't know any other way.
Yeah. I hate to see cats squirting around on a gig. It's a silly song, so they're going to play some silly shit, and like, no, 100%.
Yeah, I hate that too, man. It's like, and they have this conception that, well, when I get that gig, whoever that gig is with, maybe they want to play with, Pat Metheny. They go, well, then I'll turn it on. No.
Mm,
First you have to do that, and then Pat Metheny finds you. You don't find Pat Metheny; he finds you.
right. When I was in Los
Um,
Angeles in the 80s, you could play weddings, and cats were bringing their racks. They brought their real shit, their real deal. They wanted to make sure they mastered it. And every note was for real on every gig.
that's inspiring to hear, man. I've heard like in the old days, you'd see Ray Brown playing at a wedding. Is that possible?
Yeah, I know Mel Lewis did them in New York. I don't know that Ray Brown did weddings. Um, there's a joke that Bill Berry used to tell trumpet player from Ellington's band. He said he had a gig at Dante's on a Tuesday night and he couldn't find a bass player. And he called everybody. He called Ray Brown, and Ray Brown gave him like 10, 15 names, and he couldn't do it. So finally Ray did it. And they're on the gig, and somebody said, how did you get Ray Brown on this gig? And he says, well, nobody else was available.
That's, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, but
Jesus.
you would see
Well,
the guys in the studio who all day would go play at, the jazz clubs at the time for, $50, $60 just to pay the bar bill and hang out and play music.
well, now that now that the music business is really bizarre, you see all kinds of people playing on Broadway. I mean, basically, the studio scene kind of comes out of the Broadway scene. The top Broadway guys are the record date guys and the TV show guys and the film score guys and the jazz band guys.
Right. Let's talk about for each show, there's a cast album, right?
Yes.
And when is that done? Is that right off the bat or a few weeks in? I think you told me once
Uh,
that when the only time you're really going to hear the exact Broadway band that was hired for that show was like in the first couple of weeks.
yeah, there's a month. Well, there's a preview period. They call it the lockout. You can't take off. And then you can take off officially the ninth show after the opening. So let's say tonight is Tuesday. So let's say our show opened tonight and there were 8 shows this week. Next Tuesday night, you can take off the first time. So you're locked in for a week. What a lot of shows seem to be doing now is doing the cast album before the show hits the ground. I guess they want to use it as a promotion, but the typical thing is the show's running for a little bit and it settles in, and then like on a day off, like on a Monday, they do it all in one day.
Do the whole show album.
Yeah, like a marathon crazy day.
Well, it's only a 2-hour show generally, but that's a lot of recording in one day.
I mean, the first real grown-up show I did was The Life, Cy Coleman's show, and we were in there from 10 in the morning. We walked out at midnight.
Wow.
There were no synths. It was an all organic, performance-based kind of show. There was no trickery. I think we used a click track on 1 or 2 songs, but it took that long. You know, we didn't do a lot of takes, man. Really, one take, 2 at the absolute most. It just takes long.
I'm looking at this list of shows I got somewhere from you. It's just amazing. The Life, Civil War, Cats and the King, Seussical, Thoroughly Modern Millie, Lennon, Come Fly With Me, The Wedding Singer. It goes on and on. Shrek the Musical.
Yeah.
What was Lennon about?
Oh, man.
John Lennon or Lennon the...
No. John Lennon from the Beatles.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm a complete Beatle nut, so I was really excited.
Yeah, that piqued my interest too.
What's that?
That piqued my interest when I saw that. Tell me about that show.
Well, Yoko was the guy who was the director and kind of wrote the book-ish. He was a huge Beatle fan, but she kind of wouldn't let him do his thing. And she was hands-on. She wouldn't let us use any Beatle music.
What?
The only Beatles songs we could play were the songs that the Beatles covered, like Money, the Motown song.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And she was just very difficult, man. She just, it was like St. Johnny, you know, it was like nothing, he didn't do anything bad in this play, right? And we went to San Francisco for 6 weeks, and it just went on and on and on. It was a huge failure, man. And it was sad because I love the Beatles, you know.
Yeah. Well, that show Cash was a huge failure. I mean, it was about Johnny Cash, but they had no stars, no sets, and no costumes. Really, it was just I don't know.
Well, yeah. This Lennon thing, they had this idea that everyone was John and John was everyone. So it wasn't like one guy was John Lennon. It was most people in the cast were Lennon. A woman was Lennon. This guy was Lennon. That was Lennon.
Yeah.
And she wanted to show the universe of that, you know, how universal he was. He was every guy, you know. But it was confusing. It never came off. The show was a huge failure, man.
It's hard to pull off, you know, a Broadway show when you think of the script and the book. And
it could have been. Yeah, I mean, it could have been really because he was a complicated guy, John Lennon, right?
Sure.
Very complicated guy. He was a beautiful guy, and he was a difficult guy, and he was brilliant, and he was mean, and he was kind. And, he had a lot of crazy shit happen to him as a kid. And it could have been really something, man, you know. But she didn't want anyone we didn't talk about any weird stuff like John's mother getting killed by a bus. There was none of that, you know. And which was a drag, because it could have been something else. I mean, of course, I loved putting the headphones on and digging through the tunes. We did a lot of what was John's last album called? Oh, jeez, I'm drawing a blank. The one with Starting Over and all of those tunes.
Or something like that?
Double Fantasy, right.
Oh.
So I took the pencil out and I wrote down all of Andy Newmark's parts and it was fun, and we played a lot of John's music, and which I didn't know intimately, but you know, Mother, Woman is the Nigger of the World. I mean, all this crazy shit that he had, and it was so different than the Beatles, you know. Mm-hmm. A lot of anxiety for him.
Well, it's a cool show to do. I mean, the drummer, you know, all you can do is play good drums. The show is the show.
Yeah, I mean, one good thing was, the director. He was a Beatle fanatic, so we had in the room rehearsal room. They went and got the real Beatle boots from the guy in London, and the suits, the polyester suits they wore with no sleeves. They went to that tailor, and it was great, man. That part was great, and just being in Beatle dust,
Stardust.
Yeah,
Ringo Starr.
I have a picture up there from the opening night with Yoko, which was really hard to do, even though I was around her for months. She had these burly bodyguards, and she saw my face. I was there every day. Just to take the picture was like a big deal. To the bodyguard standing on the side, like I guess she's freaked out after what happened to John.
She has reason to be freaked out. Yeah.
Absolutely, man.
Well, how about traveling? I mean, it used to be the curse of the studio player or the Broadway player was if you left town, it's like you moved to another planet.
Yeah, I think that's still true, man. I think if you go away and you do one of these shows on the road and you come back, you kind of, have to start again. It's not like we live in Wyoming here and there's no one who can play the drums,
Yeah.
I mean, you and I both know that I could get on the phone and put together a spectacular band and do the same thing at 5 o'clock and then 8 o'clock, of all different people. So, yeah, I mean, that's a reality. I know I probably would have had a better studio career, but I was always on the road. And I would start relationships with people, and then I was always on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Not with shows. I never did a show on the road. But there's still time.
Well, that's another thing. There's usually the Broadway show and then the touring company shows, right?
I didn't. Last winter, I got an emergency COVID call to go and play a week with the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory show that I did on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun. They were nice people. It was very professional. I had no idea what I was going to walk into, but it was like I was going to play with the Doobie Brothers. It was like a big sound company and equipment guys. And, I had no idea. I was thinking like I'm going to walk into some rickety little, stage thing. And not like that at all, man. It was a big production. I think there are big productions out there. Unless it's what they call the bus and truck, which I think is more prop up the tent, kind of vibe.
Right. We touched earlier on whether you're in a union hall or not. Like if you're playing in a union hall and you want to move a mic 2 inches, you don't touch that mic. Right? And then if you do another gig the next week and it's not a union gig and you want to move the mic and somebody says, so move it, man. What do you want from me?
Yeah. I've been in places where I go, hey, man, is it okay to can I move? Go, what are you asking me for?
Right.
Then in other
to
places,
be courteous, man.
Yeah.
That's kind of funny. So what's the longest one? Go ahead.
This is a seriously union town. Local 1, Local 802. These guys are fierce.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. I'm a pro-union guy. What's the longest run you've ever done?
The longest was 2 years, Thoroughly Modern Millie. Because I don't have the greatest business gene, I was offered Mamma Mia when it first started and didn't take the show, which would have been a 13-year run. But so don't ask me for stock advice, bro. I'm not your man.
You're not my investment counselor. Huh?
So Thoroughly Modern Millie lasted 2 years. Most of them don't last. Thoroughly Modern Millie won a Tony, Best Musical. So most of them don't last for whatever reason.
What about COVID? How did you guys survive? I mean, Broadway was down, right?
It was horrible. I mean, fortunately for me, and I had the pension going. I had Social Security. And then I had those payments that we got, man, those weekly, insanely big unemployment payments.
Wasn't that great? I got those too. And I didn't feel
it was
bad
unbelievable.
About it. Yeah, I didn't feel bad about it because in my whole life, I've never been able to get that.
No, I didn't feel bad about any of it, man, because, I scrambled like the best of them. to make a living, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, I don't feel bad about A&F at all. But it was that part of the drama for me wasn't the financial part was okay. The part that was tough, I think, for everyone is being that we're all type A people, got to do, go, 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 get in the car, go to the gig. Like all of a sudden, there was no gig.
I'm telling you,
We
man,
were all sitting at home. You, me, Barbara Streisand, Michael
the hardest
McDonald,
part.
whatever,
Everybody. You can't say, well, it's just me. What have I done wrong? I must have pissed somebody off. No, it's the whole business, the whole industry. We're all sitting at home. So I did. Go ahead.
The only people I know who really killed it there are a bunch of friends I have that have home studios, and they're brilliant, and they were just busy like crazy. Because TV still went on. In fact, TV went, there was a lot of TV, and people were still producing music. So these people with the home studios, they were killing it.
I've done a few days from here that way where you send it in. That's a whole different way of making a living.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that's over, it seems to be. And we're all back to trying to get to some normalcy. But the industry itself is not what it ever was and ever will be again, probably, right?
It's, New York City. I mean, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but it's, when I was a young guy, there were jazz clubs on every corner and rock clubs, and it was just total madness. I mean, there were recording studios above delis that were cutting hit records, and everything was handmade. There were no synthesizers, right? And TV hadn't exploded. There were a handful of channels. Yeah. It was a different world.
It was. The electric. I have a student, very gifted kid, and I've known him for 4 or 5 years. But when he was maybe 13, he played something for me that he had composed, and he won an award. And what he had done is masterfully, but what he had done is taken loops and snips and samples and assembled something, right? So that it had a beginning and a middle and an end, and it used timbres and textures correctly and sounds that went together well, and it worked as a piece of music. But I had to tell him afterwards, in a supportive way, you didn't write anything.
It's another word, man. I mean, now we're into like a whole other thing. I can't even. I don't. It's just different, It's like apples and hubcaps, It's just a different system of music.
Yeah.
I just can't put it in the same room as Tom Jobim or Joni Mitchell or George Gershwin or Lennon McCartney. Yeah. It's another way to express, which is almost unrelated. This assembling of sounds and making a collage of it.
That's a good way to look at it, Warren. Like, we got to stop. Guys our age have to stop looking at it with our old eyes and look at it as a different thing altogether.
It's just different, man. It's another set of rules, in my mind.
No, I completely agree with you.
And, it's funny, man. Grady Tate, again, we love Grady Tate. And he was talking about, how when the funding to all these schools stopped and, the music programs got cut out. And he said, but, these kids that he would see, they just had so much music in them. They were just banging rhythms on their body. And that was kind of like some of the beginning of that whole sampling, assembling kind of music, Because when I was a kid, there was a school orchestra or something,
Right.
They cut back all those programs. Yeah, but people still have a desire to express themselves. And they figured out a way,
Yeah, I mean, I got with the program to some extent when I had my company. We did a sample of cymbals we did Peter Erskine. It's called Virtually Erskine, and it was his cymbals and his drums that we sampled to death in VST format, and then his grooves. And it was weird, and I asked him about it too. It was weird to hear afterwards things people had done, knowing, well, that's Peter's drums and cymbals, and Peter's playing. But he doesn't know this guy, and he's never been there.
It's a different world, man. I mean, I have this app, like you might have it, the Steve Gadd's drum sample thing. And I practice along with it, because his feel is so amazing.
Exactly.
And
Great for that.
there's probably people all over the world who are using those Steve's brush patterns on their songs.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. And you hear a record, and it's a record, but I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's drums, real drums, somebody playing, somebody phoning it in. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. It sounds good, right? Like Duke Ellington.
Well, we'll have to see what hit.
What would Ellington
we'll
say now? If he sounds good, if it's music, it works, right?
We'll have to see how history plays it out, man. I mean, I think they're going to listen to the Beatles 100 years from now.
I think so.
Sinatra doesn't seem to be fading away. It's still,
never will. Yeah.
And
well, it's still
if you ask me my personal opinion, even all this home recording, I'll send you the file and you put your thing in. None of that stuff to me has the same vibe as if you put on Aretha Franklin's Respect.
Absolutely.
I mean, that thing just pops out of the speakers and blows your mind. But maybe it's my sensibility, what I like, what I was raised on. It's hard to tell at this point.
Right, that's what I was hinting at. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either, man. I don't know either. But I definitely get the most thrills if I put on Wes Montgomery. It's just I'm old. What can I say?
I know. Ray Charles still can make me cry. That's
Yep.
That's what we came up with. All right. Yep. Anything else you want to talk about? I think I've gone through my notes, but
I would say, if it's something you want to do, play on Broadway, pursue your dream, man. But, work really hard at it. And I just want to put this out there in the World Wide Web. There is a belief amongst people that if I just knew this guy or knew that guy, then some magic door would open. That might work once. It's not a career,
Right.
Really learn your craft, I mean, do whatever you have to do to get really good. Find guys who are really good at it. See how they did it. I mean, if you want to become a jazz drummer, listen to Elvin Jones and how did he put it together, and all these guys. So take it seriously, man. Don't think you're one connection away from that fantasy gig that's in your mind.
Yeah, I always tell students, there are lucky breaks, and you can get a lucky break, but it doesn't make a career. It gives you a start.
No, it doesn't.
It gives you a leg up on something. You got a nice break, but you don't play professionally for 40 years because of that, unless you've done your homework and can deliver.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And for people who want to do this in sub, figure out the conducting and prepare until you just blue in the face,
All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Special thanks again to Warren and to everyone for watching. Throw a couple of spots at you on the way out, and we'll see you next time on Drummer Nation Live. Thanks, everyone.
I absolutely love playing drums, and I couldn't imagine not having that in my life. And I really, if I could help facilitate that and have an impact on your life so that you can play drums, that means the world to me.
Hello everyone, my name is David Victor. I'm General Manager with the Craviato Drum Company. We wanted to offer a one-ply, solid shell product, but we wanted it to stay true to our mission of offering handmade drums of uncompromised quality built here in the USA. So take a listen to our Center Stage Series drum set.